right? So let's see what we got. These are our speakers. We got myself, we have Leroy, and we have Will. Leroy is from the city of Chico, California, and Will is from Anne Arundel County, which is right there on the Chesapeake. Next, a little bit about who ROC is, kind of why you should maybe listen to us. I guess that's totally up to you, but I think we have some pretty compelling reasons that you should listen to us. That first one, that's kind of regardless. We are an Esri Platinum partner, but that doesn't mean you should listen to us. We just happen to be a Platinum partner. We are on the Esri Advisory Council. That's kind of important. So we have a lot of input on the partner ecosystem and how Esri pushes changes and updates out to the public, right? We have an international footprint. We are worldwide. We have AWS certified staff, we have Azure certified staff, we have GCP certified staff. So we're really, really competent in the cloud space. With that, we also have, as you can see, all the specialties and awards and whatnot. We also have a very, very deep understanding of the ArcGIS enterprise and what it takes to make it work most effectively. So in short, so we've been actually managing cloud environments since about 2016. And with that, we've gained a lot of very specific GIS and IT experience. We were also one of the, I think they're getting ready to do away with this, but we were the only Esri partner that I'm aware of that had the Esri Kubernetes specialty, which I think they are going to retire shortly. So what do we do here at ROC? So primarily we deploy, migrate, and manage ArcGIS enterprise systems in cloud environments like AWS or Azure. So we manage that stack from top to bottom, all the infrastructure and the health and well-being of your ArcGIS enterprise. With that comes lots of different aspects. There's virtualized desktops, so you guys can work with Pro, and some of the engineers out there can use Civil 3D. And of course, we offer all of that infrastructure, right? So we're running in the cloud. We stand up that infrastructure on AWS or Azure and move you in and get that whole system working like a champ. Briefly, this is just a very small sampling of some of the customers that we serve. We don't see a lot of these smaller municipalities on here, but we serve hundreds of different clients with Fortune 100s, very small municipalities, and basically every Esri vertical in between, right? Engineering, commercial, utilities, telecom, lots and lots of state and local government, oil and gas, public safety, transportation, at different state levels, local levels. The list goes on and on. Just about every vertical you can imagine that uses GIS. So briefly, the agenda. Here's what we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about the key phases of the disaster management cycle and how GIS managed cloud services can play a role in that cycle. We're going to talk about how to leverage this technology to help you plan and enhance your ability to respond to a disaster. What are the benefits of having this infrastructure, your data, your systems running in the cloud versus on-premise? And overall, how to gain that greater agility and your efficiency and your ability to respond to these types of disasters. So what is a disaster? I might as well start out there. So in technical terms, disasters are, I guess, a serious disruption to your community, your state, your locality, one that will exceed your ability to kind of cope using your own resources, right? Disasters can be caused by natural processes like hurricanes, earthquakes, or floods. They can be man-made, such as a cyber attack or a crypto locker attack, or just a general infrastructure failure, right? Servers die, hard disks go bad. but whether they're natural, whether this disaster is natural or man-made, they can both affect, the health, the exposure, and the actual vulnerability of, your community, your state, your city. So let's talk about, what we can do to prepare and actually respond to a disaster. A geographic information system and its integration has become really a vital tool in disaster management in this era where natural disaster frequency and the intensity are really rising, and us and our organizations as the decision makers, we can gain important insights from GIS, which I'll just repeat for the sake of repeating, which is, it's a technology that records and evaluates and displays spatial geographic data. When we're planning for these, planning for and recovering from a disaster, right? A GIS is crucial. Example, as we all probably already know, GIS is used extensively to prepare for disasters and then respond after a disaster has occurred. GIS, for example, GIS is absolutely crucial for, again, small example, for planning debris removal before. So if we know a storm is coming, where are we going to pile up those debris piles, right? And then after, you want that ability to execute on that plan after a disaster. So mobile field workers, making sure that the refuse, the flooded houses and all that stuff is confined to that one specific area for pickup, right? This is not something that you don't already know. I'm sure we all know that GIS plays a very crucial role in planning for and responding to these natural disasters. So let's look at this, the disaster management phases, right? And let's consider some key points. We know that your GIS is absolutely vital. All the GIS people know this. It's absolutely vital for coordinating a response to a natural disaster. So consider if that same natural disaster affected, your actual ability to respond to that disaster. So did the hurricane or wildfire, did that affect your office, or did it affect your data center? You need to be sure, right? Again, no matter what, that your servers, your applications, your infrastructure, and your GIS as a whole remain accessible. Again, we know that your organization, and in many cases, the public have become and are dependent on your GIS and its associated applications. So critical information is often disseminated through the use of these GIS applications. A good example, think about maybe a hurricane evacuation zone application or a wildfire boundary map. You and the public have become consumers of this critical information, right? I'm going to bet you guys know where I'm going with this, right? What happens when everybody hits these applications, right? Assuming that the hurricane has not affected your data center, right? Or in preparation for your data center, in preparation for that disaster, you send out these applications to the public. You can imagine pretty quickly that they're going to become absolutely overwhelmed with traffic. I've seen this happen time and time again. So is your infrastructure, think about it, is your infrastructure able to scale up quickly enough to meet those huge traffic, demand spikes, right? Oftentimes with on-premise hardware stack, that answer is sadly going to be no. That's not always true, but most often it is. We really do see this happen all the time. Many or most of our clients need to be able to scale up in a very, very quickly. Lastly, that last bullet, that's kind of a catch-all. Do you have the resources to keep everything up and running smoothly across the board? In times of the disaster, in times planning for the disaster, and other times just keeping it up and running. It's probably no surprise, but I think we all realize that the ArcGIS Enterprise system as a whole has grown in complexity over the years. It's been pretty, it's gotten pretty crazy. So why? These systems have grown to be much more complex, right? Not just the hardware, not just the software, but the security rules, the demands that have been put on our systems. The key point here is we're not just talking about a a simple map service server anymore, right? We've got different application servers. We've got portal, data store, geo event. We've got backend geodatabases. We've got web servers, all of which need to be managed and kept secure. I see GIS departments that have become overwhelmed by all the things that this encompasses now, and it's become difficult to keep that system up and running in an optimal manner. Really, a huge component of keeping your system up and running is your infrastructure and your relationship with IT. So do you and IT both understand what needs to be done to keep this enterprise system up? Lots of things rely on IT, and there's lots of things that rely on GIS, right? Do you guys understand what needs to be done? Things like, public and private subnets, what ports need to be opened, how to secure the stack. And this is just mentioning just a tiny few. Along that, so do you have the staff on the GIS side to actually handle these requirements? Do you have the adequate IT resources to devote to your GIS? Again, the complexity of these systems have grown so much throughout the years. You really do have to have trained staff on both ends, the IT and the GIS, that can help you help you effectively manage these systems. And I hate to put that little thing on your shoulder, but just let's not forget that you become, kind of liable for ensuring that these systems remain up and secure. Another big one that folks have to consider is, have you budgeted for the potential growth and the ability to scale your system? So think about it this way. If you're on premise, all of your hardware is on premise, you are probably in some type of multi-year hardware refresh cycle, right? So that means you need to estimate how much hardware you might need on day one when you submit your budget for that hardware. But you also need to consider what you might need in year 4 or 5 of that hardware cycle, right? Year 1 and 2, you're going to be fine. You're going to have enough hardware, hopefully. But you're also going to have a lot of leftover capacity that is sitting there unused that you are paying for. So then we come along to year 4, year 5. Maybe you have enough, maybe you need more, but you got to consider in either way, in either event, you're overpaying in year 1 and year 2. Year 3, maybe you're okay, but then year 4 and 5, you still may have excess hardware, or you might find that you need more and you're stuck. Are you going to have that ability to scale? Either way you look at this, it's really an inefficient way to budget, right? It'd be a lot better if you could just pay for exactly what you were using. You don't want to pay for any more. You don't want to pay for less, right? Well, you might want to pay for less, but the goal here is to use your budget effectively and not overspend on hardware that you're not going to need. So real quick, what does a GIS look like in the cloud? Really kind of the same, right? You still have servers, you have an ArcGIS, you have a portal, you have a database, you have content, you've got applications and users. This is the GIS that you work with every day, those servers, those applications. It looks and it functions much the same as it did if it were sitting on premise. They can be base deployments like we're looking at here, or they can, like this one, become much, much larger with a dev environment, a staging environment, a production environment. This one also might have, or this one has a direct connection back to the on-premise system. Either way, the point is that these are really still servers. It has ArcGIS Enterprise and all of the other applications and integrations that you probably have now. Again, the goal here is to realize that it looks very much the same running in the cloud as it might on premise. Okay, so really, what would my GIS look like in the cloud beyond that diagram? Well, it really is, again, it's going to function very much like your on-premise system, but you're going to have you're going to have several benefits available to you. Think about it like this. If you're making that cloud journey, right? This is the first time you're moving into the cloud. You're going to have that option to design and migrate your system the right way, right? We don't want to deploy or migrate an existing system that has been probably upgraded 3 or 4 times since version 10.7.1 on a 4-year-old hardware. We want to have that opportunity to make that move to the cloud and to take advantage of a well-architected framework, one built with these cloud-first technologies that we're going to dive into a little bit. Also, it's a great opportunity to, re-architect, clean out the closet, so to speak, right? And migrate what you need. There's no need to drag along 4 years of stuff that you probably don't need anymore. In the end, the cloud can provide a very performant, a very accessible, very secure, resilient, and most importantly, scalable system. As we discussed earlier, these are absolutely key to being able to respond in the event of an actual disaster. In short, just all of these cloud hyperscalers, folks like AWS or Azure, they have the built-in technology to make your systems highly available and scalable. And if done properly, it's very, very easy to be able to recover from a disaster. These are a couple of things that I would like you guys to keep in mind and things you should be considering if you're making that move to the cloud and how you can prep for disaster recovery. First, take very frequent snapshots of your environment, right? Sounds simple, but with a very robust snapshot policy, you can make an identical copy of your entire system, every machine, every drive, all of it. Take these snapshots, and again, these are just backups of the entire system, not talking file level backups or database backups or what have you. This is snapshotting the entire environment as it stands. We take those snapshots and we'd like to ship them off to a secondary geographic region, right? So if something were to happen to, let's say, US East 1, an earthquake hit, we would still like that ability to be able to bring those snapshots up in a secondary data center, right? That's really important. As an organization, and this is just a baseline, we like to take 2 snapshots of a client's entire system per day. And you may want to get more aggressive with that depending on your IT policies. You may want to get more aggressive with your database backups. You can do them more frequently. You can have real-time replication. Again, I can't stress this enough. The tools that the cloud provides makes these types of backups and recovery very, very easy. And they're all completely and fully customizable to your organization, right? We're not worried about product 1 over here, product 2 over here. This one's going to do the SQL backups. This is going to do the snapshots, and how are we going to move them? It's all integrated, that one pane of glass when you've moved into the cloud. So if your system ever does go down because of a data center regional outage, like I said before, we have that ability to take those snapshots and spin it up in a secondary region, right? Again, that's why we don't want to store all of our snapshots and backups in the same general region as our disaster recovery landing zone, so to speak, right? So if we're in US East 1, we're going to take those snapshots and we're going to ship them over to US West 2, right? Now, this next one here, this hopefully goes without saying, but honestly, the best preparation for a disaster, whether it's going to be natural or man-made, is to have a plan in place before. Like, Were the snapshots? Where are they? What tool sets are you going to use to restore? Who's going to be responsible for each one of those steps? That's honestly just naming a few. Then test your plan. Were you able to actually meet all of those goals? And let's be honest, you probably were able to catch most of it, right? Take that opportunity to learn from your mistakes, what you missed, and then plan again, and then test again. This, as you probably have gathered, is going to be an ongoing exercise. Just remember that the best preparation for a disaster is to accept, right? Accept that this disaster is going to happen, right? So how can I best recover when this disaster happens? That's all about the plan, right? Make that plan, test that plan, and accept that the disaster will happen. You will be prepared for it. You always hope you don't have to, but you always must make that assumption that you will. And lastly, I just really skimmed the surface on everything that, not everything, some of the things that you and your organization need to do to be adequately prepared for this type of disaster. And I realized that a couple of bullet points on disaster recovery isn't going to cut it. As I mentioned in the intro slides, ROC, shameless plug here, right? ROC is a managed service provider for your enterprise GIS system. What we've just talked about is what we do all day, every day. So when we manage your system, we basically take care of all of this. We take care of your backups, your snapshots, patching the OS, patching the enterprise, upgrading to new versions. I'm sure folks are thinking about 11.3 right about now. Making sure that everything is secure, making sure that everything is performant, basically all of it, right? Many organizations, and this is just a plain simple fact, right? Many organizations just don't have the staff to do all of this, right? It's just how it is. But this is how we can, as a whole, ROC can play a crucial role in ensuring that your GIS system is fault tolerant, it can be performant, and you will be able to effectively recover from any type of disaster, man-made or natural. That was my quick brief overview. So I'd like to hand it over to some to talk about some client stories. Now, while we do that, it looks like Kate's got another poll up. If you guys have a couple of seconds, who has had a disaster? Unnervingly, we've had lots of people that have had either a real disaster or a near miss. Yes, that's all too worrisome, right? I mean, it happens. All right, we're going to start finishing up that. And now, after this poll is done, we are going to hand it off to Leroy from Chico, California. He's going to talk a little bit about disaster recovery and what happened, how we could help, and what we did. Take it away, Leroy.
Thanks, Jason. Hey, for those who don't know where Chico is, about 7 years ago, we are 20 minutes from a town called Paradise that got decimated by fire. And so, Jason, you talk about natural disasters. That one was within 2 hours, and the entire town of Paradise was turned to ashes. So infrastructure, all buildings, etc. But one thing that you don't think of is a user error. So we moved to RockTech for cloud services. Everything else was on-prem prior to that in 2023, and spent a lot of time converting and getting it into cloud-based. But April, we finished a big project of bringing all of our past 10-year sewer and storm drain documentation and layers and pipes and applications and all that data getting it put into GIS and brought up to speed. And in April, we had a user, one of our people on staff, who went to update and override that information with some new changes. And in this particular case, our sewer and storm drain infrastructure had 5 layers in it, and they overrode it with only 4 layers. And so all of a sudden, the work that we had done, that the public and the public works side and engineering that they depend on seeing, went from about 63,000 records down to 0, and all within a matter of seconds. So having it in the cloud allowed us to contact RockTech, who we work with, um, and be able to pull back from our data store an image that was only a couple hours old. And rather than losing 10 years of history that had been put in over the last year, we were able to restore and then just spend some time getting layers re-linked within just a matter of a day. And it's amazing how many people who look at that information will quickly scream and holler when it disappears, but they're very happy when it does reappear. And we didn't have to depend on IT, who was not really in the position to be able to bring that into place. So there's different kinds of disasters, including user errors.
That's very true. And as many of us might know, the data store in particular can be very, very difficult to restore unless you do a big WebGIS DR, which can be a big pain in the butt. So having that ability to snapshot that data store without using a WebGIS DR, a WebGIS disaster recovery tool. So snapshotting that server gives us the ability to actually spin that server back up in an isolated state and then pull the content that, in this case, Leroy needed for his water and sewer. Lots of different options that might be a little bit more difficult to do when you're running on premise, right? So thank you, Leroy. Any parting words? I think you covered it pretty good. We can certainly have natural disasters, and we can also fat finger and delete lots of stuff. Machines can also become corrupted, right? A server might fail. We're less likely to have actual technical server failures in the cloud, right? Because we can just migrate to a new host. On premise, that can be an issue. A hard drive goes bad, or your internet link goes down, or whatever. Lots of things can happen. That's some of the benefits that the cloud can really provide. So next, I think we're going to shift it over to Will from Anne Arundel County. Take it away, Will.
Thank you, Jason.
You got
Hello,
it.
everybody. I'm Will Lucas. I'm a systems programmer 2 for OIT GIS in Anne Arundel County, Maryland. And um, Jason talked a lot about the kinds of natural disasters that you can encounter. And those are for sure a huge thing to be concerned about. I'm very thankful that in my time at the county, I have not been here when we've encountered one of those. The biggest disaster that I remember the county having to deal with was the COVID pandemic. So, um, pre-rock, let me give you a bit of background on our environment. So pre-rock, pre-cloud, Anne Arundel County, what we would do with our GIS was we would receive disks with shape files and data from different departments who had their own GIS professional specific to that department. They would gather all of their data, get in the state that they were comfortable with, and then give it to us for publishing. And that whole process took a lot of time. It left a lot of room for error. It required a lot of man hours to continually update the files that were the production published version. And because the county didn't have any cloud connectivity at that time, the data would have to go from the place of origin into a separate editing space and then move again into a separate production space. Now, thankfully, before the pandemic happened, the county got in contact with Rocked, and we were able to migrate in our environment to the cloud. And so once we moved everything into the cloud, we were able to streamline processes, make it so that data was available all in the cloud instead of having to move through these siloed processes on-prem in the county. And we're able to make everything much more available to county users. So when the pandemic happened, and we had to move to working from home, before we even had IT get us set up with virtual environments and being able to remote into our old workstations in the county offices, our GIS data and GIS infrastructure was available day dot when we had to move from home because it was a cloud environment. And in addition to that, aside from just the availability there, it also we had resources freed up that we didn't have in the past because of this streamlined process that was a benefit of moving to the cloud. You know, prior to moving to the cloud, when the health department was trying to disseminate information, they would go through a long process, and the most sophisticated product they could produce were PDFs. Because we were in the cloud, we had the resources to be able to assist the health department during COVID to develop dashboards for them. That's not something we had the capability to do pre-cloud. When we receive a question from the public about a data set, we no longer have to scramble to put it together. Most of the time now, we already have that data set published and available in our cloud environment. So the big thing that I want to highlight is the availability that the cloud gives you, where your GIS is available to the public and to your GIS users. When we think of the cloud, this is the thought I want to end on. Internally for the county, we call the cloud a force multiplier. It allows you to focus on the GIS as a GIS professional because you know that with someone with Rock, you have a whole team behind you handling all of the infrastructure, all the upgrades, all the backup. You don't have to worry about the minutia of the IT. You can focus on the things that you're trying to do as a GIS professional.
Yeah, those are really good points, Will. I think that was a huge shift during COVID that everybody just started working from home, right? That put a lot of strain on remote workers. It put a lot of strain on services that different counties or states provided. And one of them, I can still remember this specifically for you guys when you guys started publishing those COVID dashboards, right? They became extremely popular, right? They were getting huge amounts of hits, and honestly, I look at your traffic stats every once in a while, and I see that it's still one of the more popular items out there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, we had to handle the amount of traffic that those COVID dashboards were sending into your system. You know, thank goodness we had the ability to quickly scale up your systems, right? Because if we didn't, you know, people would be getting to those dashboards and getting errors or, you know, really slow response times. So just having that ability to, you know, scale up the servers, add more resources, you know, hopefully makes those maps and those resources available to the public much quicker without that frustration. You know, there's nothing worse than getting to a website and you know, having it be slow, right? That's the worst. So that's another thing that the, you know, like I mentioned in my chat is, you know, the ability to scale up really quickly. That can help quite a bit. All right. So I think we've We've gone through the overview. We've talked to a couple of rock clients. I think it's time for you guys to start firing off any questions. Kate, did we have any interesting questions? Now's your time.
Yeah, we do have a question here. Is moving GIS to the cloud enough to be prepared for a disaster?
So the answer to that is probably not, right? It is not the end all cure all of of disaster recovery. Kind of hopefully, as I mentioned, you've got to be prepared. You've got to have that plan. You've got to test that plan. However, the one thing that the cloud does is make that disaster recovery exercise much easier, much more straightforward, right? Everything's in that one pane of glass. So you can do all your snapshots, all your backups is in that one interface. And should something go wrong, right? We don't have to call IT. You don't have to, well, depending on how it's managed, you may have to call IT, but if it's a managed service, you just say, hey, it's down. I need to fix this. There's no coordinating with IT. There's no coordinating with the other GIS users and figuring out what should we do, who's doing this, what's happening. When you're in the cloud, again, you have that one single pane of glass that is going to be able to rapidly restore your system to a known good state. Typically, so we have different levels of SLAs, right? Typically speaking, the SLA that most people go for is like a 4-hour downtime window. Like you can live with being down for 4 hours, right? That's a complete rebuild of your system in a new region, right? It will almost never, I've never had to take, I don't want to say never, but it usually takes about 30 minutes to actually restore a server should have something have been corrupted, or 30 minutes to be able to restore some critical data that you may need to roll back to. So in short, the cloud makes it easier, right? All the tools are in one place versus on-premise. You've got different vendors doing different things. IT, you've got the GIS folks. It can become a little bit more difficult. And that's assuming that you do have all these snapshot policies, these backup policies in place already, right? Cool. Hopefully that answered that question. Looks like we have a different one here about cyber attacks. So yeah, this should be probably big on everybody's mind at this point. We've seen cities like Atlanta be absolutely decimated by these, cyber attacks. I think they got crypto locked, basically almost all their systems, right? This happens, unfortunately, all of the time. Now, we're not going to be able to protect, your entire city or your entire organization, but what we can do is provide, highest possible security for your GIS system, right? And we know how important that is to be able to respond in these times of disaster or get that information out there. So cyber attacks and crypto locking, that's really tricky. I see it all too much where people have just put their whole GIS out in a DMZ and they just, all right, let's hope it works and nobody does anything bad. Have that security technical know-how in place on day one to know how to protect your system. Have those long-term snapshots and backups in place that you can roll back to in case you do get attacked, in case there is a 3-month time bomb crypto locker on your system, right? That ability to, A, be proactive in the security of your system, and B, or two, the ability to roll back a system, after an attack has happened. Again, plan as though that attack will happen. You hope it never does. We haven't had one, knock on wood, but we approach every system in that it will happen. That is the best way to prepare, right? All right. Hopefully that answered that question. All right, so we are currently using a Azure Citrix solution to host both ArcGIS Desktop and ArcGIS Pro. The performance of 3D with Pro is really bad. Is it possible to support 3D with good performance on a remote platform? Yes, the answer is 100% yes. I'm going to go off the guess that if you're using Citrix, you've got either a session host or a pooled instance. The key takeaway there is to make sure that if you're running ArcGIS Pro and other intensive applications like that, 3D and whatnot, is to ensure that there is a GPU attached to that large Citrix server. Once that GPU is attached, it can be configured, and I think in many cases, ArcGIS Pro can run faster in a cloud environment than it can on your local hardware, right? The great benefit of that is, your daily workspace is running in the cloud. You can open up and access that workspace from anywhere on earth. If you're working from home, if you're working in the office, if you're at a conference, you can just launch your virtualized workspace, and Pro is right there. All of your resources, your servers, your data, everything is in that one location, right? So folks that are working in Office A and Office B, they're able to collaborate in that one spot. So yeah, long story short, I think your issue is probably a GPU or lack thereof. Once you get that in place, it should be smooth sailing. Hopefully that answered that question. All right, looks like we have a couple of questions for Anne Arundel and City of Chico. If you guys don't mind, how did you guys actually convince your organization that we needed to move to the cloud? Like, what happened? Was there an event, or you guys just recognized that it was time, or what? Anybody have any input? Will or Leroy?
I can't speak to the exact scenario because I was not with the county at the time the decision was made, but from what I was told, we had seen other organizations and municipalities starting to move to the cloud, and that was during a time where we were also having a look at our processes and wanted the opportunity to re-engineer our workflows and how we should be approaching managing our GIS. And so with that kind of support from higher up, as well as a strong desire from the GIS people administering the GIS, we were able to get the go ahead to move to the cloud.
From Chico's standpoint, I was here when we moved over. There were two driving forces. One is we needed to let all 400 of our employees have viewing access. So we needed to move to an enterprise system. And our IT department established that they were not in a position to manage our portal and to bring in the hardware and the support. And so we then were given from the top down that we needed to find a solution. And that is why we then went with RockTech, but also for the cloud, because we have people who are off-site and need to access that information. Hope that helps.
Yeah, thanks, Leroy. Thanks, Will. Yeah, those are all kind of good reasons to make that move to the cloud. It can be tough to convince leadership on, why we should be doing this. There is really a big case to be made that it is less expensive than hiring, additional staff to actually manage the system. There's a good use case or a good, ROI for provisioning cloud-based hardware as opposed to going and buying new physical hardware. Again, like I spoke about with the, that hardware refresh cycle. On year one, you've got to go buy $100,000 worth of servers for what you're going to need over 5 years, right? You probably only needed 25 grand worth in the beginning, but then as your needs grow, it's going to ramp up. And by the time you get to the end of life in year 4 or 5, whatever it is, you may still have capacity, or you may have too much capacity. The point would be is to only pay for what you need. So if you need a new server, deploy a new server and pay for that new server, as opposed to spending all this money and hope, knock on wood, you got it all right. There's lots of reasons to make that cloud move, and it should be a pretty compelling argument when you bring all of those things together. Staffing costs, infrastructure costs, and actually just managing and making sure that your system is up and running and resilient, right? Those are all things you should be considering. And I think that's the end of our questions. Gosh, I hope everybody, let's get to, I hope everybody, got something out of this. This was kind of a real brief overview, but it's our hope that you learned a little something. Always feel free to reach out to us, even if you don't want to work with us. Sadly, I'm kind of a nerd. Our whole team are really kind of nerdy and passionate about IT and GIS. So if you guys have any questions, you just want to bounce some ideas, we're always more than happy to help. And get to our website at rocktech.net.